would you do if you found an elderly couple sitting in their broken-down car in the middle of a deadly blizzard, refusing to get out because they were waiting for help? That's exactly what happened to Navy SEAL veteran Axel Thompson on Christmas Eve, when a routine supply run turned into a race against time to save 2 lives that had been given up for lost. But what this 78-year-old couple was hiding in that frozen car wasn't just stubbornness. It was a 50-year love story that would test everything Axel believed about sacrifice, loyalty, and what it means to never leave anyone behind. This is the true story of Harold and Margaret Peterson, a Christmas Eve miracle in the Montana wilderness, and the moment when "get in the truck" became the 3 words that saved not just 2 lives, but an entire family's faith in Christmas miracles. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, and if you believe that sometimes angels come in pickup trucks, hit that like button. You're going to need every bit of Christmas spirit you have for this one. Now let's begin. Christmas Eve in Montana was brutal that year. The Weather Service had issued warnings about the worst blizzard to hit the region in over a decade. Wind speeds reached 55 miles per hour, visibility dropped to less than 10 feet, and the temperature plummeted to 22 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill approaching 40. Most sensible people were home by their fireplaces, waiting out the storm with hot cocoa and holiday movies. But Axel Thompson wasn't most people. The 35-year-old Navy SEAL veteran was making his monthly supply run to deliver Christmas presents and emergency provisions to the isolated families who lived in the remote areas around his Montana property. It was something he'd started doing after settling in the wilderness, a way to give back to the community that had accepted him and his 3 extraordinary dogs. Scout, Ranger, and Angel, the legendary Midnight Brotherhood, sat alert in the back of his heavy-duty pickup truck, their search and rescue instincts on high alert, despite this being a routine supply run. The dogs had learned to read weather patterns and danger signs as well as any human, and tonight, everything about their body language said this storm was different. Axel's truck was equipped for extreme weather conditions: snow tires, chains, emergency supplies, cold weather gear, and communication equipment. After 8 years as a SEAL, he'd learned that preparation was the difference between mission success and catastrophe. He was returning from his final delivery of the evening, a family with newborn twins who lived 15 miles from the nearest paved road, when his headlights caught something that shouldn't have been there. A car, stopped dead in the middle of the mountain road, completely buried in snow up to its windows. "What the hell?" Axel muttered, immediately shifting into emergency mode. He pulled his truck alongside the stranded vehicle and grabbed his high-powered flashlight. Through the frost-covered windows, he could make out 2 figures inside the car, an elderly man and woman sitting perfectly still in the front seats. Axel's heart sank. In conditions like this, a stranded car became a death trap within hours. Hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning if they'd kept the engine running, dehydration, the possibilities were all grim. He approached the driver's side window and knocked firmly, shining his flashlight to make himself visible. The elderly man inside turned toward the sound, and Axel was relieved to see alert, conscious eyes looking back at him. The man appeared to be in his late 70s, wearing a thick winter coat and wool hat. Beside him, an elderly woman, presumably his wife, was wrapped in multiple blankets. Axel gestured for them to roll down the window. After a moment's hesitation, the man complied, creating a small gap through which the frigid air immediately rushed. "Sir, I'm Axel Thompson," he called over the howling wind. "You folks need to get out of this car right now. How long have you been stuck here?" "Since about noon," the man replied with surprising clarity. His voice carried the dignity of someone who'd lived through many challenges, but Axel could hear the exhaustion underneath. "I'm Harold Peterson, and this is my wife Margaret. Our car broke down, and we've been waiting for help." Axel checked his watch. It was nearly 8 p.m. They'd been trapped for 8 hours in conditions that could kill a person in half that time. "Mr. Peterson, I have a heated truck with emergency supplies. You and your wife need to come with me right now. This storm isn't letting up, and your car isn't safe." Harold Peterson looked back at his wife, then at Axel with eyes that held both gratitude and something else, something that looked like fear. "Young man, I appreciate the offer, but Margaret, she's not doing well," moving her mite. "We've been married 50 years, and if this is where our journey ends, then we'll face it together." The words hit Axel like a physical blow. Harold Peterson wasn't just being stubborn, he was protecting his wife from what he believed might be a fatal journey to safety. Axel moved to the passenger side and looked through the window at Margaret Peterson. Even in the dim light, he could see she was in bad shape. Her lips had a blue tinge, her breathing was shallow, and she appeared to be drifting in and out of consciousness. But she was alive, and in Axel's world, alive meant there was still a mission to complete. He returned to Harold's window with the authority and urgency of someone who'd commanded men in life-and-death situations. "Mr. Peterson, look at me," Axel said firmly. "I'm a former Navy SEAL with medical training, and I have 3 search and rescue dogs in my truck. Your wife has hypothermia, and every minute we waste talking is a minute closer to losing her. I'm not asking you to trust a stranger. I'm telling you that right now, I'm her best chance." Harold studied Axel's face through the window, perhaps seeing something in his expression that convinced him this wasn't just another Good Samaritan, but someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. "Can you really save her?" Harold asked quietly. "I can try," Axel replied, "but we need to move now." Behind Axel, Scout, Ranger, and Angel had positioned themselves at the back of the truck, ready for whatever rescue operation was about to unfold. The dogs seemed to understand that lives hung in the balance. Harold Peterson looked at his wife one more time, then back at Axel. "What do you need us to do?" "First, I'm going to help Margaret into my truck where it's warm and I can assess her condition. Then we're getting both of you somewhere safe. This isn't a request, Mr. Peterson." Axel opened the passenger door of the stranded car, and the full impact of the situation hit him immediately. Margaret Peterson was barely conscious, her body temperature dangerously low, and she'd been slowly dying while her husband held her hand and waited for help that might never have come. As he carefully lifted the elderly woman into his arms, Harold Peterson grabbed his hand. "Please," the old man whispered. "She's all I have. We've never spent a night apart in 50 years. Axel looked into the eyes of a man who was facing the possibility of losing everything that mattered to him. "Then tonight won't be the first," Axel promised. "Get in the truck, Mr. Peterson. Nobody gets left behind." The rescue that followed would test every skill Axel had learned as a SEAL, every instinct the Midnight Brotherhood had developed, and every ounce of Christmas miracle that Montana could provide. But sometimes the most important words aren't "I love you" or "Merry Christmas." Sometimes the most important words are simply, "Get in the truck." Getting Margaret Peterson from the frozen car to Axel's heated truck was like moving someone made of glass. Every step risked shattering what little life remained in her body. Axel had seen hypothermia cases during cold weather training exercises, but this was different. Margaret had been slowly freezing for 8 hours while maintaining consciousness, just long enough to keep her husband calm. Her sacrifice was written in every labored breath. "Easy, Mrs. Peterson," Axel whispered as he carefully placed her in the passenger seat of his truck. "You're safe now." The moment the truck's heat hit Margaret's face, her eyes fluttered open for the first time in hours. She looked around with confusion until she saw Harold climbing into the back seat, then her face softened with relief. "Harold?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm right here, Maggie," Harold replied, reaching forward to touch her shoulder. "This nice young man is helping us." Scout, Ranger, and Angel immediately went into their protective formation around the elderly couple. Scout positioned himself beside Harold, providing warmth and comfort. Ranger took point by the front windshield, alert for any dangers. Angel, with her incredible intuitive abilities, curled up at Margaret's feet, somehow knowing exactly where her warmth was needed most. Axel quickly assessed Margaret's condition while starting the drive toward town. Her pulse was weak but steady, her breathing shallow, and her core body temperature dangerously low. But she was responsive, which meant they still had time. "Mr. Peterson," Axel called back while navigating through the blizzard, "I need you to help me understand what happened. How did you end up stranded out here?" Harold's voice carried the weight of a man who'd been replaying the same terrible decisions for 8 hours. "We were driving back from Billings. Margaret had her chemotherapy treatment today. Has been for 6 months now. Stage 3 breast cancer." The words hit Axel like a sledgehammer. Margaret Peterson wasn't just an elderly woman caught in a storm. She was a cancer patient whose body was already weakened from months of treatment. "Our car started making strange noises about 20 miles back," Harold continued. "Then it just died." I tried calling for help, but there's no cell service out here. Margaret told me we should stay with the car, that someone would find us." "She was right," Axel said firmly. "I found you." Margaret stirred in the front seat, her voice stronger now that warmth was returning to her body. "Harold was so worried. I kept telling him everything would be okay, that God would send someone." "Maggie's always been the strong one," Harold said, his voice breaking slightly. "Even now, with the cancer, she's the one keeping my spirits up. Today was supposed to be her last chemotherapy session before Christmas. We were so excited to finally be done with treatments." Axel glanced at Margaret in the passenger seat. Despite everything she'd been through, cancer treatments, being trapped in a freezing car, hypothermia, she was holding Harold's hand and smiling weakly. "How long have you two been married?" Axel asked, needing to keep them talking and alert. 51 years next month," Margaret replied. "We met at a church dance in 1972. Harold was so shy, he asked me to dance 3 times before I said yes." "Only because you were dancing with every other fellow there first," Harold protested gently, bringing the first smile Axel had seen from him. "I had to make sure you really wanted to dance with me," Margaret laughed, then began coughing, a harsh sound that reminded everyone of her weakened condition. Angel immediately moved closer to Margaret, resting her head on the elderly woman's lap. The gesture was so gentle and perfectly timed that Margaret's coughing subsided almost immediately. "That's Angel," Axel explained. "She has a gift for knowing exactly what people need." As they drove through the storm, Harold began telling their love story, partly to keep Margaret alert, but mostly because he needed to remember the good times. They'd raised 4 children, built a small farm from nothing, survived Harold's tour in Vietnam, and had been each other's constant companions through 5 decades of life. "We've never spent a Christmas apart," Harold said. "Even when I was overseas, Margaret would record herself reading Christmas stories and mail the cassette tapes to me. And Harold would send me pressed flowers from wherever he was stationed," Margaret added softly. "I still have every one of them in our Bible." 20 minutes into the drive, they encountered a problem Axel hadn't anticipated. The storm had worsened, and a tree had fallen across the main road to Kalispell. The detour would add an hour to their journey, time Margaret might not have. Axel made a command decision that would change everything. "We're going to my cabin," he announced. "It's 15 minutes away. I have medical supplies, and we can wait out the worst of the storm there. Then I'll get you to the hospital." Harold looked uncertain. "We don't want to impose." "Mr. Peterson," Axel said firmly, "I've been in situations where split-second decisions mean the difference between life and death. Right now, getting Margaret warm and stable is more important than following protocol. Trust me." When they reached Axel's cabin, Scout, Ranger, and Angel immediately went into action. Scout ran ahead to alert the house, though no one was there. Ranger swept the perimeter for safety, and Angel stayed with Margaret as Axel helped her inside. The warm cabin was like stepping into another world after hours in the frozen car. Axel immediately got Margaret settled on the couch near the fireplace, wrapped her in heated blankets, and began treating her for hypothermia using his military medical training. "Your body temperature is coming up," he told her after checking with a digital thermometer. "You're going to be okay." But it was what happened next that transformed a rescue into something magical. Harold Peterson, sitting beside his wife on Axel's couch, began to cry. Not from fear or exhaustion, but from gratitude that overwhelmed him completely. 51 years, he whispered to Margaret, "and I almost lost you on Christmas Eve." Margaret reached up and touched her husband's face. "Harold Peterson, you listen to me. You couldn't lose me if you tried. We made a promise before God, and no blizzard, no cancer, no nothing is going to break that promise." Scout, Ranger, and Angel had positioned themselves around the couch in their protective triangle formation. But this time, they began making their soft melodic sound, the same harmonious singing they'd used to comfort frightened children in hospitals. Margaret and Harold looked at the dogs in wonder as the peaceful sound filled the cabin. "They're singing to us," Margaret whispered. "It's what they do," Axel explained. "When they sense people who need comfort, they sing. They've done it for scared children, lost hikers, anyone who needs to know they're not alone." Harold looked at Axel with tears in his eyes. "How did you know? How did you know to find us exactly when we needed you most?" Axel looked at the elderly couple. 51 years of love and loyalty wrapped in blankets by his fireplace, serenaded by 3 dogs who understood the power of being there when people needed hope most. "Maybe I didn't find you," Axel said quietly. "Maybe you found me." Outside, the Christmas Eve blizzard continued to rage, but inside the cabin, warmth and love and the promise of 51 more years together had turned a potential tragedy into a Christmas miracle. The night was far from over, though, and the lesson Harold and Margaret Peterson were about to teach Axel about love, loyalty, and what really matters at Christmas would change his understanding of his own purpose forever. As Margaret's condition stabilized and the warmth returned to her body, Harold Peterson made a request that caught Axel completely off guard. "Son," Harold said, settling beside his wife on the couch, "would you mind if we told you about our Christmas tradition? We haven't missed it in 50 years, and I'd hate for tonight to be the first." Axel looked around his sparse cabin, a place designed for solitude, not holiday celebrations. "I don't really do Christmas, Mr. Peterson. I don't have decorations or—" Margaret smiled weakly but warmly. "Oh, sweetie, Christmas isn't about decorations. It's about remembering why love matters most when everything seems darkest." What followed was a story that would reshape everything Axel thought he knew about the holidays, family, and the purpose of the life he'd built in isolation. Harold and Margaret began telling him about their Christmas Eve tradition, started during their first year of marriage when they had no money for gifts or decorations. Instead of focusing on what they didn't have, they would spend the evening sharing 3 things: one memory from the year that showed their love growing stronger, one challenge they'd overcome together, and one dream they shared for the future. "1973 was our first Christmas," Margaret said, her voice gaining strength. "Harold had just come back from Vietnam, and we were living in a 1-room apartment above Mrs. Chen's grocery store. We had $17 to our name. But we were rich in ways that mattered," Harold added. "That Christmas Eve, Maggie told me her dream was for us to have a family farm where children could visit and learn about animals. I thought it was impossible. 48 years later, we had 4 kids, 12 grandchildren, and a farm that hosted summer camps for inner-city children for 3 decades," Margaret continued. "Dreams don't seem impossible when you have someone who believes in them with you." As the elderly couple continued their tradition, sharing memories from 2024, Margaret's cancer diagnosis, the fear they'd both felt, the way they'd held each other through chemotherapy sessions, Axel found himself thinking about his own life. He'd built a successful existence focused on helping others, but he'd never shared it with anyone in the way Harold and Margaret shared everything. He had the Midnight Brotherhood, he had his mission, but he'd never had what these 2 people had created together. "What about challenges?" Harold asked Margaret gently. "The cancer, of course," she replied matter-of-factly. "But the real challenge wasn't the disease. It was learning to let Harold take care of me when I'd spent 50 years taking care of everyone else." Harold squeezed her hand. "And my challenge was learning that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from every hard thing. Sometimes love means holding their hand while they face the hard things." Scout, Ranger, and Angel remained in their protective formation, but Axel noticed something different in their behavior. They weren't just providing comfort, they were learning. The dogs were observing this demonstration of long-term loyalty and partnership with the same attention they gave to search and rescue training. "Now for dreams," Margaret said, looking directly at Axel. "This year, our dream is to see our great-grandchildren grow up, of course. But we also have a new dream. We want to find a way to help young people understand what we learned," Harold explained. "That real love isn't the butterflies in your stomach feeling you see in movies. Real love is choosing to build something together, one day at a time, even when it's hard." Margaret turned to Axel with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "And what about you, dear? What's your dream for next year?" The question hit Axel harder than any enemy fire he'd faced in combat. He'd spent years focused on missions, on helping others, on the next search and rescue operation. But he'd never asked himself what he wanted to build that would last beyond the next emergency. I honestly don't know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on the work that I never thought about building something permanent." "That's because you've been thinking like a soldier," Harold said gently. Soldiers focus on the mission, but civilians focus on building homes and families and legacies. Maybe it's time for you to think about which one you want to be. As if to emphasize the point, Margaret began coughing again, the harsh reminder that her time was limited, that every moment of the love she shared with Harold was precious because it was numbered. Angel immediately moved closer, but this time she did something extraordinary. She looked back at Axel with an expression that seemed to say, "Pay attention. This is important." "Son," Harold said, noticing Axel's contemplative silence, "can I tell you something that might sound presumptuous?" Axel nodded. "You saved our lives tonight, but I think maybe God put us in that car, not just so you could rescue us, but so we could show you something you needed to see." "What's that?" Margaret smiled. "That love isn't a mission you complete. It's a home you build, one choice at a time, with someone who chooses to build it with you." As if summoned by the conversation, Axel's satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed Sheriff Chen, likely checking on the storm situation or needing the Midnight Brotherhood for an emergency. "Axel," Chen's voice was tight with concern. "We've got reports of multiple cars stranded throughout the county. Search and rescue is overwhelmed. Any chance you and the dogs could help coordinate rescue operations?" Axel looked at Harold and Margaret Peterson, safe and warm in his cabin, having just taught him more about life purpose than 8 years of military service. He looked at Scout, Ranger, and Angel, ready as always to serve others in need. "Copy that," Axel replied. "But I've got 2 additional team members tonight who know something about not leaving people behind." Harold and Margaret exchanged glances. "We want to help," Margaret said firmly. "If there are other families out there in the cold, we can't just sit here while you risk everything to save them." "Ma'am, you just recovered from hypothermia," Axel protested. "Young man," Harold said with military authority in his voice, "I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and Margaret organized disaster relief for 3 counties for 20 years. We didn't survive 51 years together by sitting on the sidelines when people needed help." Margaret struggled to sit up straighter. "Besides, this truck of yours seats 6 people. If you're going to be picking up stranded families, you'll need coordinators who can keep everyone calm and organized." It was then that Axel realized what Harold and Margaret were offering wasn't just help with the rescue operations. They were offering to show him what it looked like to face challenges as a team, to build something together even in the middle of a crisis. The Christmas Eve blizzard was far from over, but in his cabin, surrounded by 3 extraordinary dogs and 2 people who had turned love into a 50-year mission, Axel began to understand that maybe the most important rescues weren't about pulling people from danger. Maybe the most important rescues were about showing people what it looked like to never face the danger alone. The night's real mission was just beginning. What happened over the next 6 hours became known as the Christmas Eve Miracle Convoy throughout Montana. Operating from Axel's heated truck with Harold and Margaret as his coordination team, they rescued 13 families, 37 people total, from the worst blizzard in Montana history. But more importantly, they showed an entire community what it looked like when love becomes action. Margaret Peterson, still recovering from hypothermia, became the voice of calm for terrified children over Axel's radio system. "Hello, sweeties, this is Grandma Margaret," she would say to each stranded family. "The nice man with the big truck and the singing dogs is coming to get you. Everything's going to be okay." Harold Peterson, drawing on 50 years of leadership experience, coordinated rescue routes and managed logistics with military precision. "Son, if you approach from the East Ridge, you'll avoid the power lines that went down an hour ago," he'd advise Axel. "Trust me, I've been driving these roads since before you were born." Scout, Ranger, and Angel worked as they never had before, not just as search and rescue dogs, but as comfort providers. Every family they rescued was greeted by the Midnight Brotherhood's gentle singing, a sound that told them they were safe, they were found, they were no longer alone. But it was the rescue of the Martinez family that changed everything. At 3:47 a.m., they found Carlos and Elena Martinez with their 3 young children, ages 4, 6, and 8, trapped in their minivan that had slid into a ditch. The family had been stranded for 12 hours, and the youngest child, little Sophia, was showing signs of severe hypothermia. As Axel worked to warm Sophia in the truck, she looked up at Margaret Peterson with frightened eyes and whispered, "Are we going to die, lady?" Margaret Peterson took the child's cold hands in her own warm ones and spoke words that would become legend in that community. "Oh, sweet baby, no. You see, sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they have pickup trucks and dogs that sing. And sometimes the very best miracles happen when people who love each other decide to spend their Christmas Eve making sure no one spends it alone." As Sophia's color returned and her breathing stabilized, her 6-year-old brother Miguel asked, "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." It was Harold who answered, his voice carrying 51 years of wisdom. "Son, we help you because someone helped us. And someday, when you're all grown up, you'll help someone else. That's how love works. It keeps going from one person to the next, making sure everyone gets home safe." By dawn on Christmas morning, they had delivered all 13 families to safety at the Kalispell Community Center, where hot food, warm blankets, and volunteer medical care waited. But as Axel, Harold, and Margaret sat in the truck with the Midnight Brotherhood, watching families reunite and children play, something profound had shifted. "You know what I realized tonight?" Axel said, watching as little Sophia ran to show other children how Angel could sing on command. "What's that, son?" Harold asked. "I spent years thinking my mission was to save people from emergencies, but you two showed me that the real mission is saving people from facing life alone." Margaret reached forward from the back seat and squeezed Axel's shoulder. "And you showed us that love isn't just something you build in a marriage. Love is something you can share with everyone you meet, one rescue at a time." Sheriff Chen approached their truck as the sun rose over the Montana mountains. "Axel, what you three did tonight, I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just save lives, you saved Christmas for 37 people." "Correction," Harold Peterson said with a smile. "Axel saved Christmas for 39 people. Margaret and I thought ours was over when that car broke down, but this young man and his dog showed us that Christmas isn't about what you have, it's about what you're willing to share." 6 months later, the Christmas Eve miracle story had spread across social media and news outlets nationwide. But the real miracle wasn't the rescues. It was what happened afterward. Harold and Margaret Peterson moved to a cabin just 3 miles from Axel's property. Margaret's cancer went into full remission, and together with Axel, they established the Montana Mutual Aid Network, a community response system where neighbors help neighbors. No one faces emergencies alone, and every person matters. The Midnight Brotherhood became the heart of the program, with Scout, Ranger, and Angel training other dog and handler teams across the region. But their most important lesson wasn't about search and rescue techniques. It was about the singing, the comfort, the promise that no one ever has to face their darkest moments in silence. Axel Thompson, the Navy SEAL who had built his life around solitary service, discovered that the most powerful missions are the ones you don't undertake alone. He found his family not through blood or marriage, but through choice, choosing to build something lasting with people who understood that love is spelled T-I-M-E and spelled S-E-R-V-I-C-E and spelled get in the truck. Every Christmas Eve since, the three of them repeat Harold and Margaret's tradition, sharing memories that show love growing stronger, challenges overcome together, and dreams for the future. And every year, Scout, Ranger, and Angel add their harmonious voices to the tradition, singing the song that reminds everyone present that they are never alone. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about two people finding each other. Sometimes they're about people who have already found love deciding to share it with everyone they meet. Sometimes they're about understanding that family isn't just the people you're related to. It's the people who show up for you in the blizzard, who refuse to leave you stranded, who say, get in the truck when life gets too cold to face alone. And sometimes they're about 3 dogs who learned that the most beautiful song they could sing wasn't just for the lost, the trapped, or the frightened. Sometimes the most beautiful song is the one that celebrates every person who makes it safely home. Because home isn't a place, it's the people who refuse to let you face the storm alone. For Harold and Margaret Peterson, who taught us that 50 years of love looks like showing up for others. For every family rescued on Christmas Eve, who learned that angels sometimes drive pickup trucks. For everyone who's ever been stranded in life's blizzards, your rescue is coming. Listen for the singing, and for everyone who's ever driven past someone who needed help, turn around, be the truck, be the voice that says get in, be the reason someone makes it home safe, Welcome to the Montana Mutual Aid Network, where no one faces the storm alone. 3 words that saved 39 lives. Get in the truck. 3 dogs that sang comfort in the darkness. 3 people who proved that the best families are the ones we choose to build together. And 1 Christmas Eve that reminded an entire community that love isn't just what we feel, it's what we do when someone needs us most.